about it. So, Ben, I'd like to welcome you, and if you could introduce your group.
Sure. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself and then introduce the team?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm listening to this. Sorry.
Okay.
My name is Gary Kenley. I work for the High Speed Rail. I'm the project manager for the San Jose to Merced section.
Hi, I'm Guy Preston. I work for the High Speed Rail Authority in the San Jose office. I'm the regional delivery manager for the San Francisco to San Jose and San Jose to Merced project sections.
I'm Ben Gettleman. I work for the outreach team, so I help set up meetings like this in communities across the project section.
Hi, my name is Joseph Yitz. I'm NorCal Outreach representative.
So we probably have time to do introductions.
Okay, yes, so I'd like to introduce our first person here is
Marie Arnold, and I'm a neighbor. I was on the neighborhood commission for 8 years, so I've gone to these events before, but it still helps to hear more information.
Great.
and also your neighborhood you're from.
Oh, Blossom Valley Neighborhood Association.
Claire Wilson, I'm in the neighborhood. Romy Callender, I'm also in the neighborhood, was a neighborhood commissioner, not as long as Marie, but I just thankfully turned out in June, and I am very interested in what's going on and what you have to say.
Donna Revalier, I'm just a resident over here on Gazeta Drive on the other side of the school here.
Just the resident?
I know.
Oh, your neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, I'm in the neighborhood.
Rose
Long
Collins,
time.
I'm Donna's neighbor.
Jane Fry, I'm one of the neighbors here.
Michael Fry, neighbor.
Karen Latin, interested party.
David?
David Dearborn, I live in Willow Glen. I'm not a neighbor here. But when I was a child, I had Lionel, H.O. or whatever to play with. And since those are all gone and this has come to town, I just come to listen.
You actually got a video train set?
And he was the neighborhood commissioner with us.
Yes.
Hi, David.
Yeah.
My name's Trish, I'm in the neighborhood.
My name is James Meany, and I live at Rice Way and Rice Drive, and my house backs up on Congress.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Judy Creighton. I live in District 2, not in this neighborhood right now, but I did live here for 23 years. So how the light rail, how the high-speed rail would affect this community is very important. Since I was a lot of times here.
Okay, well, I'll say, well, first of all, thank you all for coming.
Roland.
No, well, wait a minute.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. What
Oh,
was
the one who got this thing
No,
going.
no, please.
Yeah, that's right.
I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Roland because I didn't know much about this, you guys. Like I said, I was gone for 4 years. I've been back a year. I didn't know anything about this. And I've known Judy for many years because she used to be my neighbor down the road from me. And so speaking with him and her, I learned a little bit about this. So I want to say thank you all for coming tonight. And Roland, thank you very much. Oh, I'm Elizabeth Gomez, the president of EGOPIC, and Rose is my secretary treasurer. So
EGOPIC is what?
Edenvale Great Oaks Planet Plantation Coalition. That's the name of the association after.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question from legal people? How did you manage to get mass community center like this?
You don't think, it was not easy, I have to tell you that, and she can tell you all the things I had to do to go to City Hall, me and
And
David
this has been
Summers.
reused, it never actually became
Right.
a community.
We
The
want
community was
one.
able to use it. Well, this one is for District 2, it was Forest Fantasy.
Correct.
Really?
Yes.
But it went into reuse, so
Yes,
it's not available as a city building, it never has been.
Right, and that's, it was part of our community.
Oh,
But we are here for this meeting, so I apologize. Yeah, we can talk about that another time.
Sorry, off topic. Back on topic.
Sorry, y'all.
So Gary, what are you going to do about this?
I'm not sure we actually have a mitigation measure for that one just yet. But anyway, thank you very much for coming. Somewhat of an interesting weather evening. So I just want to give an overall review of the high-speed training program. It is actually happening, especially out in the Central Valley. give a little more detail about what's happening sort of in the San Jose to Merced section. Really, the sort of idea was to focus in what's happening actually in this neighborhood. And then we want to make sure we can answer any questions you have. In addition to the presentation, we have some maps at the back that are focused on this area. And if we want, I've also got my computer with me. We can open it up on Google Earth and go up and down the alignment and really zoom in. But we sort of, on the rollout maps, we very much focus in on just this area. If we want a broader view, we can expand out, get back my computer out, and take a look at a broader area of the high-speed train. So the overall view of the high-speed train, essentially it is a very high-speed train, first one planned for this country. The phase 1 implementation is from LA, Anaheim in the south, the blue line up through the Central Valley, just north of Madeira, south of Merced, there's what we call the Y, and then it comes heading west over the Pacheco Pass, through Gilroy, San Jose, and ultimately ends up in San Francisco. And then these orange lines are the phase 2 extension down to Sacramento, up to Sacramento, down to San Diego. The idea for the program is ideally to try and serve the majority of the population in California. Our goal is that we're serving about 80% of the population, which is why we're running up the Central Valley, because that's where people live in the Central Valley, and then connecting the San Francisco area with the LA basin. Why are we doing this? California is expanding, people are moving in. Projections right now we're at 33 million. I think by 2050 we're projected to get to 50 million. Those people are going to need to move around. High-speed train, a very efficient way of moving people over those sort of medium-sized distances, up to about 3-hour travel time. It is electrically operated train. We are looking to have sustainable sources for the power, so we see that we'll actually deliver better air quality, especially in the Central Valley where they have a lot of air quality problems. And also, instead of being a 3-hour drive, say to Fresno from San Jose, it cuts it down to sort of just over an hour. That's really going to help mobility, improve economic growth. You can have business meetings in the Central Valley and be back in the Bay Area or in LA in the same day. A lot of what we're doing right now is guided by the business plan. That was a plan put out by the authority at the beginning of this year that essentially identified what we're going to be doing to develop the program. It does provide a summary. I'd say the biggest feature of this business plan is it actually has a fiscally constrained program that says how we're going to pay for the first section, which is from Bakersfield up to San Jose, to $20.7 billion. It also covers how we fund the rest of the system, identifies our anticipated ridership over the years as the project matures, and describes the overall delivery milestones to get the system running. Some of the major features is really connecting California, both Northern California. Like I said, we've got the Central Valley, we've got Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto, sort of ACE corridor, and then coming through the Pacheco Pass and then up into the Bay. So again, we're trying to look at this high-speed train as really part of the overall California mobility, how it connects into the state rail plan. So generally, this connection here connects what's running up and down the Central Valley. This connects the Bay Area to the Central Valley, and then also looking, once we get to San Jose, utilizing that Caltrain corridor with a blended system, where it'd be high-speed train and Caltrain running in that same system. And then we would have stops for high-speed train, San Francisco, Millbrae to serve the airport, San Jose, Diridon, that'll be most likely to be one of the biggest multimodal hubs on the system. Down in Gilroy, at that point we then head east, and in the Central Valley there's station downtown Merced and Fresno, and then in the future for the phase 2, which is the reason for the broad area here, we've yet to define exactly where we'd run to get to Sacramento, other future stations for part of phase 2. If you haven't been out to the Central Valley, you go out there, you'll see an awful lot of construction. Often people will wonder, especially in the Bay Area, is this happening? We're talking planning and future, but out in the Central Valley, there is a lot of activity. Currently, there is 9 construction sites. We recently reached the milestone goal of having spent over $2 billion and delivering both the engineering and actually initiating the construction. And by early next year, we're looking to have another 3 sites, so a total of about 12 sites under construction. And if you go out there, you see columns going up, beams going in place, a lot of grading, a lot of earthworks happening along the 99 corridor. There is just a recent update on our website that is a little sort of fact sheet about all the locations for construction and what's happening where and why. So moving a little more focused into the San Jose Merced project area, this essentially shows that connection. We're sort of right about here, but from San Jose, essentially we follow the Monterey Highway corridor until we get down to Benal Way, Metcalf. At that point, we either continue following along the Monterey Highway corridor, or there's an option to go to the east side of Morgan Hill along 101. South of Morgan Hill, we get to San Martin Community, and then we have 2 Gilroy station locations. One is downtown Gilroy, that is sort of located exactly where the station in Gilroy is right now, by the Caltrain station. The other option is an East Gilroy station, and that would be located behind the outlet malls on Leasley if you happen to go to your shopping there for the holidays. You can see the field behind the outlet malls is where the station would be. From either of those station locations, we then come across the Pajaro River floodplain over to 152 where the alignments sort of rejoin on a single alignment. We then approximate the path of 152 through the Pacheco Pass. However, you wouldn't see the high-speed train very much because we're predominantly in tunnels through the Pacheco Pass area. Once we come around the north of the San Luis Reservoir, we get to I-5, and then we make a big loop around the forebay, and as we cross over I-5, we come down, and Henry Miller Road is the road that we follow heading east, and then this joins us up to the Central Valley. Just sort of zooming in a little more closely, in this area, sort of for tonight, all the alternatives, we essentially have 2 alternatives coming down the Monterey corridor. One is what we call the at-grade or embankment option. That would place high-speed train immediately adjacent to the Union Pacific Railroad corridor. We wouldn't be in the Union Pacific Railroad corridor, we'd be immediately adjacent to it. We take about 50-60 feet of space to get our high-speed train in. It would need to be fenced because we can't have any cars or people or anything getting onto our tracks, so it would be protected with fencing. There'd also be a wall between us and the Union Pacific because we don't want Union Pacific coming into our right-of-way. Also, we'd have to have a smaller wall to stop cars coming onto our road. And then to make space to get the high-speed train on the ground in here, we'd be looking at reconfiguring Monterey. Currently it's 6 lanes. We've been working with the city. They're proposing to reduce it down to 4 lanes, 2 lanes north and south. So we'd reduce it down to 2 lanes. So there'd be the high-speed train, and then we'd move the road over to the east side, staying essentially within, as much as we can, the public right-of-way, but the road would reduce down in width to accommodate the high-speed train. The other option through here, to provide more space for the road, would be actually put the high-speed train on an elevated, what we call viaduct, essentially a continuous bridge on columns, varies from about 40 to 60 feet high, down the median of Monterey. So Monterey would sort of be there, there would be a row of columns, and the high-speed train would be above you going down Monterey, and then Union Pacific would stay there. And that's essentially the 2 options we're looking at going down there. So this is the cross-section for the viaduct option. This is looking, if you're going down Monterey heading south. So this is the existing Union Pacific tracks that also Caltrain operate on.
Where's Monterey Road in that?
Right here.
Okay.
So the existing Monterey Road fits right in here. And essentially, this is sort of the median. You know, we will most likely end up rebuilding Monterey, because once we put the foundations in, we're going to have to rebuild portions of it. But essentially, Monterey stays where it is. We go down the median, and this structure is, let's say here, 35 to 80 feet. 35 generally provides enough clearance so all the the crossings can go underneath without having to change the roads. However, where we get to the existing overcrossings, like at Capitol and Blossom Hill, we would need to go up and over those. So that's where we would get to more like the 70 feet high down the median. One thing to note here is we're still continuing to work with the City of San Jose. This is what we call a typical section, sort of like, if there was nothing else there, this is how we'd lay it out. However, we are working with the City of San Jose to look how we can best use that available space to fit everything in. We've got the high-speed train we want to fit in. We've got left turns we need to accommodate, the traffic lanes, also bicycle lanes, and also pedestrian. And one of the advantages of the viaduct is you have more space on the ground to provide more space for those ground uses, bike trail, pedestrian. It keeps the high-speed train up and out of that environment. It means Union Pacific can just stay there. We don't need to have a wall to separate us. So it sort of keeps the high-speed train out of the road. Obviously, we do have a structure that will be going down the middle of the road to achieve that. The other option is what we call it embankment. In this area, it really is more actually on grade. So again, here's the same Union Pacific. This is a barrier wall here, which is, we estimate, approximately about 10 feet high, 3 feet thick, to make sure that Union Pacific trains predominantly don't end up in our right-of-way with our passenger trains coming by. This is a similar configuration that you would see on the viaduct, but at grade we still need the drainage on each side, so this will be about 60 feet wide. We have drainage, our cables for our conduits, the poles to support the overhead electrical power system. We have 2 tracks, again power pole, drainage on the other side, a barrier to stop any vehicles from Monterey Highway coming into our right-of-way, and then again, Monterey Highway now has been pushed over to the east side, and we anticipate, if you look, the existing Monterey Highway is right here, we anticipate in places for this to fit this at grade in, there would have to be some right-of-way takes along the east side in specific locations.
How tall is the wall between Monterey and that little wall?
This one right here, 4 to 8 feet. We sort of 4 feet would be like, it's a bit like a wall down the median of a freeway. In places, risk-based. I don't know if you drive 580, maybe it's one I know. Next to Bart, they actually have a higher wall because in case on the curves, cars are more likely to sort of go over the wall. So if that was the case, that could potentially be higher, but typically about 4 foot high with a fence on top. And then this one is a 10-foot wall, and that's to stop the freight trains.
What about on the east side of Monterey Road? Only kind of for sound barriers and barriers there, out in there.
So right now, there is a low sort of sound barrier down that side. We will need to do our noise studies, and we'll have to identify, as a result of these changes, how does that change the noise environment? And if it increases the noise significantly, which essentially, noticeable is like 5 dB, if we get that thing, then we will be looking at, enhancing the current sound. We may need to make it higher, but that's going to be subject to actually, a noise study, which we haven't started yet. So that would be something that will be looked at in the environmental document, and mitigation measures, should there be noise increases, will be identified.
And what about on your first scenario where you have it up in the air? What about noise barriers there?
Again, it's both of them. So the difference between at grade and aerial for noise, typically what happens if you're elevated and you've got these barriers here, it sort of creates somewhat of a shadow effect. So immediately close, typically, for something like this high, maybe about within 300 feet of that structure, you would typically get less noise because you're in the shadow.
Visual problem.
Yeah, but let me just stick with the noise first. So with aerial, if you're close, there's generally a little bit less noise, whereas if you're at grade, the noise just goes straight. There's no shadow effect. So generally, there's more noise in the corridor, but it dissipates quicker because the ground absorbs it better than the air does. So the aerial, it generally is slightly quieter, but the noise envelope extends wider, whereas on ground, it's a little bit louder, but that noise envelope dissipates quicker. There was another question. Here we go.
In looking at these two scenarios, what do you plan, or are you proposing as the cross streets for Monterey?
That is a very good point. So, for the at grade, as I said, for the viaduct, pretty much all the roads stay where they are. We just go over everything. For this at grade option, we've got these barriers here, which means no vehicles can cross this area. So anything crossing has to be grade separated. So in this area, which is predominantly, the big ones are here, Skyway, then Branham, and Chenoweth would all be grade separated. So what that means is those crossings for the existing intersections of Monterey and Skyway, Branham, and Chenoweth would be about 30 feet deeper than they are right now. Yeah, so essentially what you'll have is roller coaster, for want of a better word. The Monterey would come down, drop down up to about quarters of a mile away. It starts dropping down. By the time it gets to Chenoweth, it's 30 feet deep. Chenoweth would also be banked down, and we can show the extent of that on the maps. Then Monterey would come back up, so we can make connectivity between, like midway between Skyway and then Branham. It was head back down at Branham, come back up, head back down at Chenoweth, and then come back up. And then after that, they're pretty much already existing grade separations. I know it's a little hard to imagine, but...
It seems to me very short distances, though, between what is Monterey and the railroad tracks that are already there.
So,
In other words, you have a very
if you were on Monterey, you'd be driving along, and as you would go down, there would be a wall getting taller and taller because the railroad will stay level.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the cross. The only contact we have with the other part of town is using those cross
Yes.
streets.
Yeah, so, the at-grade thing was developed because initially we had proposed a viaduct, and there was a lot of adverse reaction to how that would look visually. And so we worked to develop this at-grade, but that does then result in a lot of changes on the ground.
Well, both of these solutions sound like a hell of a lot of fun. And I did see the renderings a few years ago for the at grade, and you kind of virtually cover the frontage of housing and businesses that are on this side of Monterey, and that worried me considerably because in this being an emerging neighborhood that's had a lot of ups and downs over the years, you're just creating fresh palettes for graffiti in a lot of cases in those situations. And though you just mentioned that the original proposition was for a viaduct and then the ground level, but a dozen years ago or so, when our council member at the time, Forrest Williams, brought to this meeting, this group, the solution at that point that we were told in the community was that it was going to be trenched. And that was what I ultimately voted for the high-speed rail based on that as a solution, because it seemed like it wouldn't create as much of a visual aspect and maybe even not so much of a noise aspect for the community. And it would generally leave the landscape somewhat similar to what it already was. And at that time, the artist renderings that they had that we looked at were actually Branham Lane East over to Branham Lane crossing Monterey, because the apartment complex on the corner there was just being built. The library was shortly going to be built. And they wanted to make sure that that they wouldn't be adversely affected because that was going to be a street that there was a crossover. So I'm curious with all of these solutions that involve so much concrete and so much destruction of anything green in the landscape and replacing it with huge amounts of concrete, and also creating in some parts of the spaces darkness, which is also not a good thing for a neighborhood like this. I don't understand why trenching is such a big deal. And I went to one of the very first meetings on this some years ago, when showing these, and no one would even talk to me about that issue. And I filled out a lot of comment cards, but it was one of those things where we don't want to talk about that, so we're not going to talk about it. I think we should be talking about solutions that are more humane to the community.
Actually, it's interesting because I've been on project since 2007. I'd never heard a trench through this part of the neighborhood.
Oh, I've had those conversations with you.
That wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, you may have had. Yes, we've had discussed a trench, but there was never simulations of a trench.
Yeah.
So that would have before.
Consideration.
But anyway, I mean.
That's what Europe does. That's how they get from London over to Paris. They trench it. They went under an entire water.
Well, that's tunneling.
That's actually tunneling. It's a little bit different. So, I mean,
That's not considered, I mean.
We spent some time looking at trenches conceptually. I went over to Fresno recently because there's a section where they're building the Fresno trench. And where they're building it, they have an awful lot of right-of-way. And there's an awful lot of concrete involved in building trenches as well.
But it's more of it's below.
I understand, but there are 36-inch diameter piles that go 72 feet deep, and they're one after another because you're supporting all that soil from caving in. And if you're going to build it alongside where UPRR is now, you pretty much are going to need the same amount of space that you show for the at-grade.
and you would still need to have this.
And you'd still need to have that wall. But one of the problems are, if you're trying to build a trench for both railroads to get into, you need to find a place to put Union Pacific while you build the trench. And then you need the room on the side.
They were talking about the high-speed rail being trenched, not
Yeah, why would they both have to be trenched?
Well, they wouldn't. You could trench one and leave the other up high. That's an option too. But if you do that, then you have the grade, you have UPR at the existing grade, and then you have high-speed rail in a trench, and you still need to get the road over it. Okay?
We're kind of used to
But aesthetically, it would be less intrusive.
It is, but there's a constructability concern with respect to being able to fit it in the space that you have and keep the roadway operating at the same time.
Because then you almost have to go over rather than under.
And it's extremely expensive too, but cost is not the reason why it hasn't been looked at too seriously. It's really associated with the constructability and trying to make it fit in the space that we have. And we can certainly look and discuss it in more detail with you guys.
We should look at it and discuss
And we have.
We
I know, but we haven't ignored the comments about the trench, and the city has brought up trenching with us too, and we sat down and we worked it all out, and we said it's not really a viable and practicable option for along this corridor.
I guess I'd be interested then, if we're not doing trenchers, and supposedly it's such a big cost for the city to do the trench, I'd like to know how many houses are affected and how our house values are going to drop, because that is a consideration for everyone in this room. And if you guys are saying, oh, it's more expensive for us, what about the residents for us?
We understand too.
I'm interested in seeing that side-by-side comparison. Here's how many houses are affected, here's how their house values are dropped, because that is money out of our pockets. We pay our city taxes as well. And you guys are pretty much yanking property right out from under us and saying you guys aren't worth anything. So I'd like to see the comparison of the trench versus how many properties along the way have been impacted and how much money.
Part of the problem is we probably have to shut down Monterey Highway to construct the trench too.
I think we give up Monterey Highway in order to keep our houses and
But
our life and our.
But that's your way to get to the rest of the city. That's your road network.
But it's not, because if you look at public opinion, not too many people are interested in taking the high-speed railway from city to city. they're really interested in going maybe from San Francisco down to LA, but not necessarily the stops, because once you get there, there's no car, there's no transportation. So it's really beneficial just to get straight underneath the ground from one to the other side of the city, and that's where most of the residents have said that's what they would use it for, but not to go from city to city in between.
Okay.
I mean, that's just what I've been hearing from residents.
Yes?
Essentially, what's happening is you have too narrow a space to work with. You have houses, you have development on both sides, you have the train, you have the Monterey Highway. So you really don't have the room to do it without impacting, as they're talking about, the houses, the library, the overpasses, everything. To be able to put this huge structure in that corridor. What about alternative locations like along the freeway?
The problem with getting to Highway 101 is that the train station at Dearborn is not adjacent to 101. And it's all built up between there and 101. The only place you can get to 101 and minimize your impacts is south of San Jose.
What about a small tunnel between Capitol and 101? It's not even that far of a distance. Is that 2 miles? A mile? Between right around Capitol? I mean, when you look at a map, it's the skinniest area of between those 2 points. A Communication Hill area, I think is what it is. Why can't they look at a tunnel right there to get to the other side of 101?
And there's also no space in 101 to put it. But,
What about 85, 87?
Well, there's
that was proposed when we did the scoping. The light rail is already in there. I mean, somebody had actually proposed remove light rail, put that on Monterey and high-speed train. But the problem is the roads themselves, any of the freeways, aren't straight enough to accommodate high-speed train.
Okay, so you're committed to Monterey Road?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
So-
Let's just talk about.
For part of
It
it.
seems like a big sacrifice.
Here, in this area, yes.
It's a huge sacrifice for that stretch. There's a lot, this is a community. So you're sacrificing communities for not looking at other alternatives.
Other alternatives have been looked at the program level, and the decision and the selection was the Monterey corridor.
Well, that's fine, okay. We're gonna deal with Monterey Road, we gotta stay, you're not gonna, okay?
When I
I'll
voted,
get
it was
this.
101.
Yeah, but it's Monterey Road now, Monterey Highway.
It varies from highway,
Yeah.
Monterey corridor, let's call it Monterey corridor, then we won't have to.
What
I know it is.
What I am really worried about is the devaluation of my property. Okay? And I'm abutting Monterey Road. So ideally, what I would like you to do is to do like they did in New York on Park Avenue, dig a big trench, put it down in there and cover it over it like Metro North. That would be nice. Then I wouldn't need with parks over it, or, you know, just whatever. I mean, that's ideal, it's probably too expensive.
It is.
But
But you were saying it was too expensive a few years ago when I inquired why are you wanting to put it at grade level? Oh, it's too expensive, we've already gotten rid of that as an idea. No, this was the grade level with all of the concrete that would be right out here at Monterey and Road or virtually covered.
I mean, the program put it on a viaduct through here, and then we worked with the city, and essentially they wanted to try and see if it could work out grade, which is where this came from.
So what alternative are your favorites?
Mine? I don't know. We haven't done the analysis yet. I really don't know. I mean, the viaduct, it's much like it's simpler to build. We've got the visual. It's on structure. But then if you're on grade, you don't have the visual, but you've now got to do all the grade separations. You've got more property impacts. You've got to move all the utilities out of the way. That's why we need to do a more detailed analysis to figure out which is the better one.
Can we see some comparisons between that and trenching? Because you're really only talking a few miles of it from where
I mean, we are not currently evaluating a trench through this section. We, Guy mentioned, we had looked at it in concept.
Talk about that seriously, because I'm regretting my vote.
What's the status of the city council? Or are they even involved?
Right now, we are working through a range of alternatives, and then once we've, we're right now in the middle of, back in 2010, well, from 8 to 2011, we were developing the alternatives through this project. The 2012 business plan said they wanted to build down to LA first, so work in this section pretty much slowed down very rapidly and pretty much came to a halt. Beginning of this year, it has come back to life with this 2016 business plan where they say they want to connect the valley, Central Valley to Silicon Valley. And so we've had to pick this up very rapidly. However, a lot's changed in 5 years. So what we've been doing right now is taking the old alternatives, re-looking at them, coming out, talking to stakeholders, talking to cities, the counties, and everything to say, okay, what's happened? Do these alternatives still make sense or not? And we're essentially just updating these alternatives, and we're right in the middle of that right now. Our expectation is in January to actually come out. We've got to talk to regulatory agencies as well to make sure that we have a reasonable range of alternatives. And in January, we'd be looking to come out and go through and be able to identify more of the selection process and the evaluation of the alternatives and what we're proposing to look at in the environmental document. Right now, we're sort of right in the middle of that. We have the footprints that will be the basis of that initial evaluation, but we don't have that evaluation yet to give you any more details of which way it's going.
So there's more environmental studies that are going to be done?
Much more. We haven't even started though.
At the viaduct, because
Yes.
the original studies were, there was not a viaduct happening. So now we've got a viaduct, okay, and now we've got impact for the people that are along Monterey Highway. My home is 300 feet from Monterey Highway. So I don't want a viaduct above me, and I want to know if the studies are going to be done on that.
Yes, they will. Again, my next slide actually goes through our environmental process. I just haven't quite got there yet.
Okay.
Can I just,
I feel like we don't have any rights. Like my rights were stripped.
Yeah.
And you guys all changed your minds on how this was going to happen.
Well,
all of a sudden have any rights.
right now we've got,
for any decisions.
so this was what we were looking at before, and now this is still in there, and now there's the viaduct option as well. But there was a question here.
do you have any real world examples of the grade separation? I'm trying to envision it, and I know there's an area in like San Carlos. Are you guys familiar with Caltrain?
Yes, the San Carlos one, yes.
So the I think it's Caltrain, not BART,
Yeah,
that goes, and then El Camino it parallels it, and then like the streets go.
I'm trying to think which is the one just north of that, because the San Carlos is sort of, Caltrain went up like 15 feet, and the road went down like 10 feet.
So it's not quite, it would
No,
be more
so I'm trying
dramatic
to think,
here.
there's one a little bit north of there, where, I think it's Redwood City, where it just stays level, and the road goes down all the way. So that's more what we would be doing here, because Union Pacific, they really want us to stay out of their property and not touch them. So we would need to go under them, so the road would be going down all the way, rather than raising the rail up on the berm as well.
Which, the place I'm thinking, the rail is quite raised.
Yeah, San Carlos is like
Yeah.
15, 20 feet up.
Okay.
And then you'd be raising it up to the height of that wall there, and
Yeah.
be right in those people's backyards on the other side.
I just wanted to know if trenching is completely out of the picture. That's definitely not an option.
I can say currently we are not evaluating it. However, we haven't finished the process. I know I'm sort of avoiding the question. Currently we are not. If
I
they're,
would get you to consider it.
Yes.
I would speak to your representatives.
Mr. Representative.
Good. Welcome.
I'm listening. So just so you know, I've been in office less than a week.
Yeah, you have a lot of.
No, I know I have a lot of people. So one of the things you should know is I have yet to reach out, to some of these folks that are giving these presentations. One of the troubles that I hear, or that I have, or one of the challenges is that every time I go to some of these meetings, I feel like I hear a lot of information. Sometimes it seems like it's just and I'm not sure what to make of it, so, and I certainly heard your concerns. I live not too far from Chilliwack, so I'm going to be directly impacted myself by the way this is built. I would prefer 101, but again, I've talked to Roland, certainly has a lot of great ideas. I haven't talked to all the different stakeholders, whether it be someone from the High-Speed Rail Authority or you know, other folks at the city or the county or the state. So I'm going to start doing my own research and really digging into this, but I'm here to listen and certainly I hear all your concerns.
Okay.
I have a question about how long a piece of through San Jose along Monterey does this impact in the way we're discussing? How many miles?
I should know that right off, but I can say, I mean, we essentially come in, it's
Skyway.
5 miles. Essentially, it comes in at Fair and Drive, like where the Capitol station is, just north of Capitol Expressway. And essentially, we follow this all the way down till we get to Bernard, Metcalf. So, till you get south of Silverleaf.
Are there houses down there, or is this?
It gets tighter. The further we go south, the tighter and tighter it gets. Because in this area, there is actually 6 lanes, and the city's reducing it to 4, so that provides space. So typically, in this area, we are staying within the existing right-of-way. Once we get south of Blossom Hill, and it's only the 4-lane section, then we start encroaching on, there's certain parts of the houses that sort of stick out more than most of them, and those ones would be affected.
In other words, they'd be bought
Yeah.
up and
Yes.
destroyed.
Do you have any idea what the...
Hold on a minute, I think
Okay.
lady there in the white had her hand up first.
So, I just have a question, because I've been to multiple meetings, and I think most of them, if not all, I have asked for someone to present audio of what it will sound like in the different sound barriers, and every time I get told, oh, we don't have the correct amplification, and we're not able to provide that, but we'll bring it to the next one. So I'm kind of curious, because I've listened to it on YouTube, and I'm telling you, it sounds like an aircraft carrier every 12 minutes. So I'm just curious if you brought that tonight?
No, we do not have a sound booth here with us tonight. I know it was down in LA. The problem is they want to make sure that it is a realistic comparison, which means not just turning a speaker on in your front room, but so there is actually a sound booth. I know we were looking into it to make it available, you know, somewhere locally. I think it's like a trailer. They have like 3 sound booths there. I know Ben was looking into seeing if we could get that here, but I don't have a timeline on that, but I've heard that and we are looking into it.
Or will it be after you start this construction?
I honestly, that sound booth was put together by one of the consultants on another team down south. So I don't know whether they still have it.
I think it could benefit you guys to have that. Because I'll tell
I
you,
agree.
if you listen to it on YouTube, it's like an
Yep.
airplane going right through your backyard. And so if it's not going to sound like that, I think it's only to everyone's benefit to know. Because you talk to real estate agents, you talk to anyone, and they all say that will greatly impact the value of everything around it. So
Good point. We are working on it, and we should really work that out. Okay, this gentleman here has not asked a question yet, so.
Okay, you were talking about earlier 6 lanes to 4 lanes. Have you done any studies on commute time? Have you seen Monterey Road?
Okay, so.
Besides 101, 87 are just bump to bumper, Monterey is
The
too.
6 lanes to 4 lanes is something planned by the city of San Jose anyway. Either to accommodate, essentially they're reducing, putting Monterey on a road diet to essentially provide space for some higher capacity form of transportation. If it's not high-speed train, I think they were looking at BRT, the bus rapid transit. So our project is essentially taking what the city is proposing. So we're saying we're consistent with the city's plans, but our environmental analysis will be looking at the traffic impacts.
Yeah, because I know like for the buses and the light rail, they're not barely half
They're
full.
not even full.
Yeah, I mean, so it's
They're
like.
not
Because they
even
take
full.
too long.
Yeah,
They take too long. And then when you get to that point,
You'd
the
have nowhere
station,
to
you
get.
There's nowhere to go to
your
work,
job.
yeah.
You know, so people don't take it.
I think she was, now I'll come back to you, Wilma, I think you had a question here.
Well, just that my neighbor was going to come and she didn't, but she said she's totally for, you know, whatever happens. She likes the idea of the light rail.
High-speed rail.
High-speed rail, yeah. And she says it's, that she's from Europe, she's from Switzerland. and she said, the trains won't come every 12 minutes. They'll come like an hour or a couple of hours to go from San Francisco. Isn't that, I mean,
Right now, I mean, what we're looking at, like,
how many trains go?
initial service, we'd be looking at in the peak, starting off with slightly 2 trains per hour per direction.
Really?
And then, that's opening day, and then by the time of 2029, when we sort of develop and we have service up through to San Francisco, there we would be looking at having 6 trains coming up to San Jose in each direction, and then 4 of those trains going on to San Francisco.
Per hour?
Peak hour.
Peak hour. And
Peak
then-
hours.
Yeah, so
Peak
about
hours
3 hours in the
3
morning,
hours in the
3
morning,
hours in
3
the
hours.
evening, so about 6 trains per hour per direction in the peaks, and then 4 trains per hour per direction in the middle.
So that's 12 trains going by each hour, one
Yes.
way or the other.
Once we have service all the way to San Francisco, yes. Hold on, Roland had his hand up there.
And excuse me, mine are very quick. What is the design speed for upgrade and elevated right here?
Okay, this is going to be the engineer in me. Our design speed is 220. But okay.
Design.
Okay.
That's a straight line.
Okay, but will the trains be running at that speed through here? No. Our design speed is 220. In this corridor, because of all the constraints, we're most likely looking more at like 100 to 150. And every single, because essentially the tangent, a straight line, you can go as fast as you want. Every single curve that is less than 220, we have to prepare a justification of why, because of whatever impacts, be they houses, environmental impacts, why we can't go 220.
Is the speed the same for upgrade and elevated plus or minus?
Yes.
Yes, they're very much still following the alignment of monorails, so essentially the
So I
same.
have just another question, which has got to do with the separation. I'm reasonably happy with what you're doing there with that grade. You can see the subway is unbalanced and everything, no problem with that. When you go back to the viaduct, right, it looks like there you're direct fixing. Is that what you're doing?
You're what?
Direct fixing.
There's no ballast in here is what he means. So essentially,
They're bolting the rails to the viaduct. That's what I'm
yes.
saying.
I mean, what this doesn't show is if there's any elastomeric bearings here or sound isolation, which there could well be.
Right. So will they be, yes or no?
I would expect there would be, I mean, again, we haven't done the noise studies, but pretty much any high-speed train on the structure in the built-up area is put in there with sound isolation. So I would expect, we haven't done the studies, but I would expect that there would be. And that could either be the individual attachments or what the Japanese do, where they actually put like, the floating slabs.
If you had a viaduct, so that would be all the way from Capitol to Metcalf, you would have basically mitigation of vibration, sound vibration.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm done.
That's good. Okay, we'll cycle there and then we'll come back around.
Have you done any analysis of these 2 options of the property values, changing property values along the corridor?
Have we done so yet? No.
How about doing that?
That is not something that is actually done as part of the analysis, because it's
part
marked.
of the total cost.
And that's
of
same with the
project.
decibels, because when you're bringing something like this in, you're talking the effects, the impact on all of us here. But why would you not even think of the decibels and what you
And I didn't say we weren't thinking of the decibels. What I was saying
At a
is
later time,
we aren't going through and doing
This is done
a.
at a later time.
No.
This should all happen.
But what happens is, like say, for the noise and for the visual, I mean, essentially what we're saying is we do the analysis and we identify if there are noise and visual impacts. If there are, not rocket science, but well, I mean, it's still complicated how you do it. Based on that analysis, if there are noise or visual impact, there are identified mitigations, and we put those in. Generally they are very effective because there's a lot of science behind it and works especially on the noise. I mean, there is always the issue though, if at a future date that you come to sell your house or something happens and, it comes that, essentially somebody says, oh, I would have offered you X amount, but because of the training, I'm only going to offer you this much. You have the ability to essentially go to the authority, maybe Guy can quote me here, but if you can demonstrate that you have actually suffered a hardship.
Be a citizen. It is a part of the
I don't,
And that's how some of us feel today, that
Yes.
it is a burden. You haven't even considered the fact that the noise is gonna impact us, just like we keep saying. But that hasn't even been thought of. We want this is what we're gonna
yes,
do.
we have thought about it, we need to analyze it, but,
But at a later time.
no, well, okay, hold on, can I just get through to this next, okay, why don't you go through. Let's get to here. Okay. We are right here. We've defined our general project. We are in this thing here. We've identified footprints. We are just starting the technical analysis, and we're trying to do as much outreach as we can to make sure we understand what people's concerns are, so we do the analysis. The next step is to look at what a preferred alternative would look like to give you a better idea of what we're proposing. And then, before we release the draft document in the summer, we need to do all the environmental analysis, all the technical reports, and that all gets reported in this document that comes out in the summer with all the technical appendices and the plans for you to review. We get the comments based on that, focusing in. A reason for identifying preferred alternative is to help people focus their analysis and their comments. And then based on the feedback that we get, at that point, at the end of 2017, is when we decide actually what project we're going to build. So the thing is we have to do a little initial analysis to actually be able to say, okay, this is how big and how tall and where it would go, which is sort of the point we've got to. Now all the technical specialists, the noise analysts, the visual people, the people who look after the bugs and the bunnies, the traffic specialists, the cultural resources for historic, and I think I've got a slide comes up that lists the entire range of resource areas that we need to study. All those guys are going to be working furiously for the next 4 or 5 months to do this analysis, to give you the data and the information of how these different alternatives stack up.
But how can you not do an economic impact on property values to make that analysis?
There
It
is
may not be your job to do it, but somebody in this $2 million project should have that responsibility.
Because there is an economic analysis, it's just not done on an individual home basis.
Well, why not? Well, wait, why not? It is, listen, if you affect my value of my home, it affects the county and the city because the taxes go down.
That is why it is done on a regional level, not on an individual home basis.
Well, let's make that little region Edenvale.
It's done on a census tract basis.
So basically what you're saying is there has been an estimate of how much that's going to cost.
Not yet. I mean, part of the community, the socioeconomics is looking at what the project does. There's regional growth, there's emergency services, community division, all different aspects that are looked at. However, one problem is humans are rather subjective and they make their own decisions. And so we've got to be careful because under the environmental laws, it has to be objective and not essentially speculative of what might happen.
I clearly understand that, but let me give you an example. I'm from New York, and they put a highway through the Bronx to connect 95 to the George Washington Bridge, and they destroyed a whole neighborhood. The whole neighborhood, the South Bronx went down because of that. And there are tons of examples. Detroit, lots of different cities. The economic analysis for that, it may not be your responsibility, it may not be the engineer's responsibility, but it's somebody's responsibility to do that.
And again, I'll say it one more time and then I'll stop, but we do the economic analysis. It is just not done on an individual property basis.
I don't
it's just not with that.
Do on just my equation. It must be done on a community basis.
The only thing I can say, I mean, is we have our methodologies. I mean, they essentially follow both the California Environmental Quality Act and, you know,
I understand that.
that is the requirements that we have to follow. We
Yes,
follow the established
you do that.
analysis.
You do that.
I'm not, when I say me, I mean the entire project. That's the engineering, the environmental, everybody. We have to follow the identified analysis. That's what we do.
But how do we get a state to look at the economic impact of these communities?
We opened the EIR right here since last June. That's my question. What's the answer?
It hasn't been reopened because it was never closed. And the reason for that is when the San Francisco to San Jose section was developed originally, it was developed essentially as a 4-track, essentially dedicated high-speed train tracks in the Caltrain corridor. It is now, as you point out, Roland, changed, and it is not. It is a blended service with both services using these same tracks, and that was considered to be a fundamentally different project.
Right.
South of San Jose, it has always been a dedicated high-speed train corridor from San Jose through Gilroy out to the Central Valley. When it first started, all the way through San Jose, it was on a viaduct. Because of the input from the community, we actually eliminated the viaduct and went with at grade. The business plan, looking at ways to deliver the project faster, cheaper, quicker, reintroduced the idea of a viaduct, and in certain areas, it has been welcomed as a better solution than going at grade through places like downtown Morgan Hill. So the scope of the project has not materially changed. All the comments that we received from 2009 onwards are still part of the record, will still be considered as we develop and analyze the alternatives. That's why it was not reopened to scoping, because the project had not materially changed.
So let me refine my question. I know exactly how scoping works. You ask all the questions, you lay them all on the table, and then you publish. You just did in the peninsula something called a scoping report.
Yes.
Everybody's happy with that. Everybody knows how it works. My question to you is what is the equivalent process here to handle all these concerns that all these people have if we don't have a scoping period?
We have already had a scoping period, and that was documented back in 2009.
Right. Well, right now, the city of Morgan Hill is writing a scoping letter.
That is again, Morgan Hill can call it whatever they want, but it is just a comment letter from stakeholders that will be considered as part of the process.
But
just because they're calling it a scoping letter doesn't mean
I understand.
It's reopened scoping.
I understand, but you see, what they're saying is you're completely demolishing our downtown, and they're basically introducing, effectually, even though it's outside scoping period, they're introducing a comment saying, would you consider an alignment that would be closer to 101 and stop blowing up our downtown? But what I'm saying is that in CEQA, the official process, the official way to do this is through a scoping period. And the longer you delay reopening this EIR with your new scoping period, the more difficulties you're going to cause with the project moving forward. I understand what your problem is. You've got the deadline. Everybody says final environmental documentation by the end of 2017. That's the target date you're trying to meet. But you don't understand the kind of problems you're going to cause on the way you try to push that forward. And that's my final comment.
Okay.
I think everyone here needs to take one of their comment cards and fill them out. I've never gotten a response, and I've many times written about the issue of trenching, and I'm always told by the humans that that's not part of the deal. But I think it's time to be loud. It's time to be aggressive. It's time to speak, because I don't think we get anywhere talking to these guys. I think we have to be
standing up.
That's right.
You can't blame them. They're working with.
I'm not blaming them, but I'm looking at people that I've talked to over the years at these meetings, and I've been told, no, it's too expensive, we're not talking about that, and then they catch you on the head and
Okay,
say,
question
"Oh,
here,
wait."
who wants to go to Sacramento Tuesday?
You gotta work,
All right, let's tie up that and do it.
you know, should.
You keep mentioning that in Morgan Hill, people, this is, you chose the preferred route and people were happy with it. I'd like to know. because
We haven't chosen the preferred route,
But I went to Morgantown Hall
Yeah.
meeting, and I can guarantee you, people are not happy about this. They are
Yeah.
upset, they are concerned, they have the same concerns.
Yep.
So
I
was
mean-
it happy for the high-speed railway authority?
No.
Or was it happy for the actual residents there?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the city of Morgan Hill were the ones that actually, well, I mean, south of San Jose, they're the ones that took essentially what we've done in San Jose being at grade and said, can you put it at grade through our downtown as well, rather than being on a viaduct through downtown? And then Gilroy decided that was also a good idea.
So they're just happy with the
But
other group?
the thing was, I mean, and I want to respect the residents here, but things have changed. 5 years ago, when we working with the city of Morgan Hill, there wasn't much of the land along the Union Pacific right-of-way was either vacant or essentially some industrial buildings.
Right, so the city-
Now they have put in a much higher development, and when we've come back now, they've made it very clear that coming downtown is now a very bad idea. They thought 5 years ago it was a really good idea, now they think it's a really bad idea, and so we work with them to identify other options as well. And this is a large project. Wherever it goes, somebody is going to want it to go somewhere else. So all we can do is come up with a reasonable range of alternatives, do the analysis, present it to the public, to the decision makers. That is what our job is. Once the decision is made, then we move on to actually permitting and constructing it.
What is the timeline besides the final environmental document supposedly finished in 2017? Then what are you looking at in terms of time for construction or whatever you have to do?
So I was going to say, no, we don't have to. I don't think we have an overall timeline here, do we now? So after this,
Yes.
one of the two big things about the record decision. One, it confirms the project, but also allows us to actually start buying right-of-way. We can start evaluating all the right-of-way. We will be doing it beforehand. Once there's a record decision, we can actually do the official appraisals and start buying right-of-way. At the same time, we will be soliciting proposals from design builders to actually finalize the design and actually build the project. And that essentially will take us through to the beginning of 19. So once we get a decision, you'll most likely, if you live near on the corridor, right-of-way agents will be visiting you to work through the right-of-way process. We'll be busy working with design build teams to select a design builder. And then the goal is by 2019, the design build contract is awarded, so they would start construction in that time frame for the infrastructure, the walls, the columns, and everything else. That needs to be finished by about 2021, because then in that time frame, after all the infrastructure, all the roads, the bridges, and everything else has moved out of the way, we then have another contractor that will need to come up, starting from the Central Valley, actually putting in all the rail, the track, the power, and the communication systems, our rail system. That takes about another year. That gets us through 22. We then have about a year to actually test high-speed trains in this country, since they haven't been run in this country. We need to go through all the safety testing for that. And then 2024, we actually then need to do revenue testing on the actual entire infrastructure, so then we're ready for revenue service in 2025.
So the environment, my question is, when you're doing the environmental studies, are you also including the environmental impact of the actual construction? The dust, the pounding?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
it's a very big issue.
The loss of hearing, the lung ingesting, where are we going to live?
I mean, generally it's looked at, it's characterized as the temporary impacts, that's generally the construction-related impacts, and then the permanent impacts of what's left afterwards that will stay there for longer.
Yes, so people with lung and hearing problems and health problems are going to live. They're going to include the studies to see how someone with emphysema on an oxygen tank is going to live for that construction.
I don't know about that specific example, but I know in the Central Valley, air quality is a very, very big issue, and it gets studied at a very high level of detail, including we have to look at what kind of material, where is it going to come from, where is it going to go, how many truckloads, what kinds of trucks, what kinds of engines they have, are they Title 3, Title 4, we have to mitigate all of that as well. So air quality is thoroughly covered.
Quick one. So when will the particle tunnels be completed?
The actual tunnels themselves,
Yes.
our goal is to have those tunnels completed by 21.
By 2021.
Our goal is for 2021. We have a challenge ahead of us. Again, that's just the actual holes. Then we have to put the rail and everything else through those.
I just want to go back to, you know, how you were talking about the summer of 2017 and this gentleman's concern about the pricing and why don't you do the study before. A good example is just what you said about this scoping period in 2009. I mean, so this scoping period happened in 2009. We're in 2016, almost 2017 now, and decisions have been made. You know, I mean, in a sense, things have been limited, you know, things have been eliminated, yes, and therefore decisions have been made. So what's to say that if you wait until that late in the process, okay, let's say you could have done a tunnel from, you know, Monterey to 101 somewhere, and it costs the same as all of those eminent domain things you're going to have to buy up. But you don't know that because you never did the study about it. So it just seems like the cart before the...
Well, no, because, again, things are looked at different levels. It's not like trains haven't been built, rail hasn't been built, tunnels haven't been built. We have costs for those at a planning level.
The eminent domain costs as well.
And right of way, I mean, you know, you can go to the county assessors, you talk to real estate agents.
Okay.
We know, okay, in this area, you know, a house costs, you know, typically much in this, and so it's done at that sort of level. Okay, we've got 50 homes in this area, they would typically be, say, and I don't mean when this, I'd say an area, it may be, okay, the homes in this area, they're generally, you know, single family, and they're roughly worth $200,000 to $300,000 each. That's the level. We don't go and evaluate each individual home.
I understand that.
You know, and so in the peninsula, that value is often much higher. You go out to the Central Valley, it's a lot lower. So it's done at that sort of regional level. So yeah, we count all the houses up and say, okay, houses in this area are typically based on county records, are typically sort of this much. Or businesses are generally, you know, this much. Agricultural land, if it's row crops, it's this much. If it's rangeland, it's this much. If it's, you know, orchards, it's done at that level. It's not done at, okay, this specific property thing is, okay, through this is generally what that is. Now, that's sort of at the program level, how you do the route planning.
But at some level, will that happen? I mean, in other words, will she get a different amount than this guy over here for their house? In other words, the buyout will be different because their house is maybe one better than the other?
When it actually comes to the actual right-of-way process, yes, each individual house will be appraised. We will do a written offer, we will notify the offer, we will pay the person to get their own appraisal done if they wish to. I think it's up to $5,000 we will pay for somebody to do their own. You know, that's why the right-of-way process, I mean, the actual document over there that says about how the right-of-way process works covers a lot of those elements. But the actual right-of-way acquisition is a very individual process. But for planning purposes, we can talk to counties. I mean, that's how general plans are done. It's done on an average, but the actual acquisitions are all completely individual. Okay. You know, and in this section, I think we're looking at up to, I think 1,300 was the count of the number of parcels that we have to deal with. We have a very, very large right-of-way contingent. I think they're actually looking at hiring some more. So.
But the amount of right-of-way acquisition through this neighborhood is actually very small.
Yeah, okay.
So what is the number for that?
That doesn't mitigate the financial.
Number of acquisitions.
You're absolutely correct.
So we know we can't answer that question tonight. Sorry.
But that's the question I want to answer. All of us want to answer.
You know, but I mean, the other thing is, you know, there are many other things that also influence property values beyond this project. So that's where it gets a little speculative. You know, in 2008, the value was very different than it is now. So that's why I'm saying it's hard to assess it because it changes so much.
It's not your responsibility, it's somebody's responsibility in the private.
But anyway, I think let's just let ahead.
I'm just curious, you mentioned that we could have like independent people come in and assess a property if it's eminent domain. What about people who are just frankly impacted, like 300 feet from the track?
That is only, okay.
Also
The
pay out-
right of way would only be if we are directly taking the
Right.
property
So
or a
for
piece
those
of
us
the
where
property.
Impacts, you're not concerned at all about those if you're within like 300 feet because it's not imminent.
It's not part of the right-of-way acquisition process. I wouldn't say we aren't concerned.
We're trying to
But-
mitigate our impacts to the property owners that we don't have direct impacts with.
Sounds like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to mitigate those impacts.
There is,
Doesn't sound
I would
like
agree,
you're
there is
There
a
is.
work to be done.
There is a
From the conversation in the calendar up there, his concern is wishing to either find or develop a way to input to the process the impact on land work over time for having the viaduct down Monterey versus something else. And the conversation from a scoping standpoint is closed. And yet, in spring of 2017, you will have identified the primary preferred alternative. Preliminary, pardon me.
It is.
So it's a preliminary, not, but you're.
And I don't think we had the piece in here, but that preliminary, again, this preliminary preferred alternative, what this is for, and this is actually very similar to typically how secret documents are done, where an agency will identify, this is the project we want to build, here's a few other alternatives, but this is what we want to build and this is what we're focusing on. Typically under the National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA, you have to consider all alternatives equally, and they are all presented in the draft document as equal, well, not equal, but all viable alternatives with nothing identified. As part of an effort at the federal level to accelerate these large transportation projects, because they do take a long time, there was an executive, and this comes under the FAST Act, it was MAC 21, which is essentially directing the transportation agencies to make their decisions faster. One thing to do is, typically what happens is, under a federal project, you put the draft document out there, everybody looks at it, we get all the comments, then we identify, based on the comments, what is the preferred alternative. That is then identified in the final document, that's put out there again, but because it's sort of newer information, no decision is made at that time. It is circulated for at least 30 days, and then following that, at some point after that period, then the federal lead agency, in this case the Federal Railroad Administration, would then issue their record of decision. And that can be anything from 2 months to 2 years or longer afterwards. By identifying a preliminary preferred alternative, and it is preliminary, it's saying if everything else is right and nothing changes, we believe this is the best project to serve our purpose and need. By doing that and following public comment, nothing changes. There's no analysis that's missing or something was done incorrectly. Because we have identified essentially the preferred project in the draft document, it means when we get to the final, the record of decision is issued as part of the final document. There's not a delay. So it saves anything from 2 months to however long. The other thought behind it, this has come, I think, it's my other life in the Central Valley, the why has taken even longer. Is people really want to know as soon as possible, what are you really going to build? Okay, you've got all these alternatives, great, 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 but what are you actually planning on building? So that's the idea behind this as well, is to give people a better idea is, if everything that we've done is correct, this is the way that we're headed.
To that point, when the scoping was closed, that period of comments that Monterey Road for 6 miles. Was the viaduct a part of that discussion and were there outreach into the neighborhoods affecting that 6 miles?
At the
During
time,
that scoping period?
at the time for the scoping, it was a viaduct. There wasn't that great option.
That answers my question.
The viaduct showed up in February in the 2016 business plan. That's the very first.
That's sorry. Okay, Roland, that's a continuous viaduct all the way to Gilroy.
Right.
In the original program document that initiated the project in 2008, it was essentially viaduct through San Jose, went down to grade in the rural area, went back up on viaduct through Morgan Hill, went back down to grade through San Martin.
No, we never had a viaduct.
Well, I will send you the documents from 2008 and I can show you what it was.
Well, none of those
Okay,
meetings
do
that
you
were having different.
know what, I have the documents, okay, there is a viaduct that starts just north of Capitol so that you can flip over to the side of the track and then you land back down to grade here on North.
Okay, I will defer to your better knowledge.
That's
Sorry,
a document that
I apologize. I will. Okay.
And we've got video as well from the authority that shows what this looks like. We never had a viaduct here.
Okay.
How dependent are you on the federal, the feds with the new government and all their talk, they don't want to give money to California and this whole high-speed thing is dead as far as the feds are. How much impact is, I don't want to get into this discussion, but I think it's going to have a huge impact on California. How much of it's dependent on federal money?
We currently have enough money with the existing federal money and the money from Prop 1A and the Cap and Trade Fund to build the initial operating segment from just north of Bakersfield to San Jose. We don't have the rest of the money to continue the system down to LA and Anaheim and up to San Francisco. And we've identified future federal funds as one possibility to close that gap. We don't know what the current administration is planning on doing. We've heard they're interested in investing in infrastructure, but I'm waiting for the latest tweet.
Interesting though from San Jose to Bakersfield.
That's going to be our initial operating segment based on the funding that we have available. It does help mobility within the central part of the state. It enables us to show that we have built a system that's up and operating, and we believe that'll be an impetus to help gain the additional funding needed to complete the system.
Yes.
I'm not against this project, okay? I just want to make sure you understood that. Go back to that slide where you had the various, right there. What do we need to do to make sure by the spring of 2017 that we all are on the same boat going down the same route?
Oh, on the same train going down the tracks?
Yes.
I feel that analogy.
Because right now, we're at odds. Now, I'm glad I came to this meeting because I didn't realize the two alternatives you had. But I would like to support you in the spring of 2017 to get this project going.
Okay, so
But just how do we do it, and how do we minimize the impact on this community?
So essentially, hopefully January next year, when we've got all the alternatives, we are going to have another formal set. First of all, we generally meet with we have technical working groups and community working groups. That's looking more the technical working groups, that's the government agencies, including regulatory agencies, local governments, cities, councils, and that. We then have the community ones, which are more like sort of neighborhood representatives. So again, looking more of a, not quite so focused, but more sort of regional issues, but from the community standpoint. And that sort of gives us a feedback, and then we also are looking to have the open house meetings, which are the larger, invite everybody. And the purpose of this round of meetings in early 2017 is to actually have the fully developed range of alternatives that we are proposing that will be analyzed in the environmental document. That's, hope in January is what we're planning.
But how do we keep, that's 2 months.
Then in March, before, or whenever it is, I said in March, April, before we go to the board to make a presentation on the preferred alternative, we'd be looking to do another round of meetings to say, okay, people, remember those alternatives we told you about in January? Here they are again, but here's the numbers now, at least the preliminary numbers of how these alternatives stack up in the environmental analysis. So you can look at those numbers, make comments, say, well, I think that one's really good, or you should do this one, or whatever it is, don't build it, or and if it is, no. And so those are essentially the 2 next steps. And then after that, we go to the board with our recommendation for identification of a preliminary preferred alternative. Once that's done, we then essentially take that information, plus all the environmental analysis, write, unfortunately, a rather lengthy environmental document, which will then come out in the summer, which is then the formal body of work that is used for people to review to then make a decision. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's the steps we're going through. And each one of those is providing the input to us, making the comments, to your representatives.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the process in this country. It's the way it works.
You answered the question, except you're reporting to us and not allowing us to participate in the process.
So, I don't know whether I have a feeling you didn't come to our last open house, and maybe I know.
When was the last open house?
August?
It was in May. There was one May and one June.
Okay. And then we had then we had a round of community more recently than that. At the community groups, community working groups is where we actually have more of an exercise where we gather in the input. The first step was really identifying the values. At our next round, we're going to be reporting back on those to make sure we heard those and to see how those values can be incorporated into the project. And then in the third round, it's then more actually of, I don't want to say grading them, but essentially identifying which ones work and which ones don't. At the open houses, we don't have a formal exercise like that. It really is just an information session. We're here to answer questions, and we have the ways to gather your feedback. Ben, anything you want to add to that?
I just want to make sure, does that answer your question, or is there sort of another question?
Well, he answered, you definitely answered the question. It's not the answer I want to hear, but you answered the question.
So what are you looking for?
What I'm looking for is an opportunity for this community to put input in before the decision is made.
You are doing that right now. We have people keeping notes, and it is going into our record.
But why do I feel I'm not being heard?
Because I'm not giving you the answers that you want to hear, that we're going to put it in the trench, in the tunnel, and you're going to tell people, no, just because I don't do what you say doesn't mean I didn't listen to what you said.
No, I know you're definitely listening.
So
the answer I'd like to hear is that somehow, some way in this process, it may not be your responsibility, but it's someone's responsibility to say, in the total cost of this project, here is the impact on this community. And this community is Edenvale.
Gary, a question. Scoping versus input from community open houses, information sessions, and working groups. How are they different and how are they treated?
essentially not, they're all part of the record.
They're all legally different.
I will let the environmental.
I'm the secret.
Fair enough. I am not an environmental person, but all my environmental leads disagree with that statement, Roland. But I'll leave it there. But one just point here. I mean, again, I'm not saying anything. There is also a lot of benefit from improved transportation and mobility. So what happens if somebody, and I'm just going to say, and this is why economic is very difficult. So what happens if somebody thinks, well, you know what, if I come and live down in Edenvale, I can get on a high-speed train and do my commute down to LA really easy. So I really want to buy your house, and I'm going to offer you more because of high-speed
That's
train.
fine. I'd like to know that. That's, you know, that if it's a negative impact, I want to hear.
And that, again, and that's why it's done at a regional level. It's not done on the individual houses. It's done on a regional economic development.
Maybe I should move by the airport, because I'd like to
Again,
fly
and the
Hawaii,
community,
fly
you want a
Disneyland,
community,
and I'd be by
it's
the
actually a little broader than that.
That's fine. Whatever you want to call it is 95111.
Oh, going to be doing that. So I'm not quite sure. We are doing there is an economic analysis. It will be in the document. There's a socioeconomic analysis as part of the document. That's what I've been telling you all that. It's just won't be the Edenvale community. That's too small for what.
Right, but this
But why can't I ask for it?
You can ask for it. Absolutely, you can ask for it.
I'm asking for it.
How?
Right.
But
We are asking for it.
But what? What's the button? Just so we know.
because, I mean, again, this gets into a practical. I mean, it is. We do not have endless funds. This is we are using public money for this project, and
It's my money.
Yeah.
I paid it out.
So do I. So do I.
Does it affect your house? Is it going in your backyard?
Unfortunately, it's not going to Oakland. It's going to San Francisco. So unfortunately, no, it isn't.
It doesn't really.
But for us, what good is it? We have to drive all the way downtown or go all the way to Gilroy to get this tree.
Or you can get on the Blossom Hill station and take it up to one of the connecting stations.
Yeah, but it's hard to get to do.
I understand, but what Gary's trying to say is that these large transportation projects, when you look at the economic effects, we're looking at it system-wide. And overall, high-speed rail is going to be good for the economy of California.
We know that. That's why we voted for it.
I understand that. Unfortunately, some of the local communities that it goes through, they're going to have effects. Sometimes those effects are temporary, and in the long run, property values end up going up. But it's very hard to quantify, and it's a very subjective thing. So it's a difficult situation that the community is put in, and we're doing our best to try to mitigate the impacts to this particular community, and that's why we're having this meeting here today.
So this is a unique stretch of that. And I guess when I think what just came to my head was, what was it, Gardner? What was the community from a small area that was having a big problem, and there was a lot going on. And these were meetings I went to, still talking about the trenching down in here. We are in a very unique place. We are the communities that are right there up close and personal with the railroad tracks. And also the issue that this gentleman over here brought up on the issue of you take a lane out of Monterey. Well, we all commute on Monterey Highway to go somewhere, whether it's to work, play, or whatever. And it's during the commute hour. It's not like you take a lane away and it wouldn't have a very great impact. But this community is in a very unique place with the closeness to what you're talking about. And there were other communities along the way that were small stretches that did have their things addressed. Are we not loud enough? This community doesn't tend to be able to be active always in huge numbers. You're talking about a community that's largely an underserved community where people work all types of jobs, and most people work more than one, and not 8 to 5 like many people do. And you also have a fair amount of language barriers to deal with. So when you see a group this size that's actually thinking about the rest of the community, because we know they're not here for very good reasons, and probably because they're at work, they're trying to feed their families. It's kind of like they used to say years ago, well, if for every person that actually writes a letter to their elected representative, that represents this block of people, well, that's kind of how this neighborhood is. The people that are actually able to come to a meeting like this, or are able to speak out, are able to articulate, and have the longevity of
what has gone on previously in these meetings. And I've always found them very frustrating, and that kind of continues on into this evening. But how do we get these issues of this little segment addressed? Because it's important to the life of this community.
Well, I think you're doing part of that today, and we really appreciate the fact that you guys have taken the time out of your busy days to come out here and give us an opportunity to hear what you're saying. And we are really listening to what you're saying. We're public servants. We are paid with your tax dollars, and we're trying to address your concerns the best that we possibly can. And we want to walk around the table and look at the different alternatives and get an idea of why you like certain things and why you don't, so we could possibly have an effect on the project that we're going to build. So, much appreciated.
Is there another way for more communication out to the community, to the outlying areas, and the communities all over that are impacted by this? I mean, I got one letter in summer from, I don't even know what, there's really not a lot going on as far as communication. And it doesn't really say much. It's just you know, it's a two or three words, you know, we're having information. And it's great because it's being sent out, but there's not, you don't really have any idea that there's an impact.
Well, that's why it's important that when you get the notices that you do show up when you can.
Right.
Best you can, because if we send too much information out there, people don't read it either. So the in-person experience is the best. We've shown the future meetings that we're going to have. They're going to be advertised. We want you to tell your neighbors to come, and because that usually works best.
I agree, because most of my neighbors, when I repeatedly, they have no idea. No idea. And so it's like, now I am.
So, you know, some of that responsibility, I think, falls on the hands and the lap of the council member and the folks that represent you in City Hall. And so I am just getting caught up to speed with this issue. I've been following that over for some time back. And so I'm taking it very personally that we needed, I plan to do a better job. I know I'm just elected, but I plan to do a good job in making sure we do outreach to a lot of underserved communities like this community. My sister lives here on Townshaven. My mom lives in Eden Palm Apartments right across the tracks. I live not too far from the tracks. This is very present for me. But one of the realities I know to be very true, and this applies to any decision that is made, whether it's at the state level, city level, county level, not everyone's going to be happy. That's just the reality. And so I think trying to get this project to be, to fit this community the best it can, I think is going to be my goal. I mean, certainly something as simple as, not as simple, but as important as, for example, Coyote Valley, as an example. Some people say build it, build over it, pave over it. Some say don't touch it. So what do we do as elected officials? It's very challenging. And certainly to the extent that I can influence this project, I've been to numerous of these meetings. I'm going to be reaching out to a lot of people within the Department of Transportation in the city, a lot of folks at the state level. As you know, are former city council members now at the state assembly. So we have never had that type of relationship with our state assembly members. So trying to leverage that relationship to really make, and he lives down the block. He lives not too far from the tracks at this point. And so trying to leverage that relationship and combining that with your likes and dislikes and trying to figure out the best way to move forward is very important to me. But no matter how this takes shape, there are going to be people that are going to be upset about it. I think that's just the reality, and I think it's important to acknowledge that.
You know what I see, Sergio?
I know, my house valley's right there as well. And so, and certainly that may be controversial to say, but that's the reality. And so trying to make sure we're very thoughtful as to how we move forward is very important. The analysis, I think, is important. I understand you do a broader analysis, not home by home. I understand that. And so everything that's being said, I've been in numerous of these meetings, so I'm keeping that in my head as I have these conversations. As I begin to dig into this, I want to keep that in mind.
Well, I think what is being requested by some of the neighbors here. Yeah, I mean, hold on. I think what is being requested should be looked at as a very simple thing to do. It is not affecting the route so much, or the happiness or the unhappiness. People are just asking for questions. I mean, for answers. They're asking information. They're asking for an economic report of impact. And that is something very minor. They're not saying, I don't want this project. And as you state, no matter what we do, you will find people who are happy and who are not happy. But what they are requesting as information should not be taking another 6 months just to give the answers to what they're asking for.
I agree, and I think the underlying issue here, and this happens at a number of community meetings, is the underlying issue is that people don't feel like they're really being heard. You know, that you're and you know, I say this all with all respect, that it's a big bureaucracy, state agency, whatever it may be, and that you're just giving those lip service, and it doesn't really matter what we say, and it's going to happen anyway. And that's where how people feel. And I understand that to a certain extent. But I also understand your frustration as well. You've been to a number of these meetings, and so we need to work together, try to solve this. And so
if the residents came to you, and I know it's a small circle of people here, but all of us come to you and say, look, we're not happy with the viaduct. We can work with you if you do grade level and you do these wall barriers, and we can work with that, but not viaduct. Are you then going to go back and say, hey, the people who represent the community, the ones who came continually to all these meetings, one grade level, and that's the route. We will figure out a way to do that, or is our input just not important enough to say the 15 people who showed up at every single meeting who represents the community want this, but we're still going to represent our mind?
No, your input is extremely valuable, and we always come back from these meetings and have discussions. Oh, the community is really looking forward to that, and it's one of the factors that go into the decision-making process. It's not the only one, and unfortunately, you can't always get what you want, but it's possible, and we've come back from meetings where we've worked with different communities and found solutions that were different than what was expected when we came in, and the project has evolved.
So there is a chance that with the 12 of us here, we can get this at grade or moved, because we're actually being heard, and you will go back and we will hear you say that in your meetings.
It doesn't mean that it will end up at grade, but it's going to be a factor in the evaluation, absolutely. That the community spoke to us, and the community, at least at this meeting, was overwhelmingly for the at-grade alternative. It's definitely something that we're going to consider.
So the best way then is to fill out this comment card and email it in to you? Is that the best way for us to get information?
Absolutely.
That's a very good way of doing it.
It's a very good way of doing it.
There's the answer.
I have a quick question. So I understood that you said at the time, I believe it was 2008 or 2009, you had the scoping process. Now, I mean, a lot of the people, they probably weren't here now, some of them. There are a few that have been. So our concerns are just as much as it was then. Just because they're not here doesn't mean that our today doesn't mean that it should be heard. Because it's been 7 years, but there's still a lot of the same concerns. But it doesn't seem like it's being heard as well.
So what I want to say, and this is going to come as a big surprise to everybody, because it's probably the first meeting we were frustrated. To me, this is the best meeting we ever had. I actually got the impression that you listened to us tonight for the first time ever. And I hope that you understand the people in this room essentially support this project. We want it to go through, we want it to be successful, as long as it's completely doesn't blow up, our way of life. But the thing I'd really like to point out to you is this thing called rail evolution, walking to the Edenvale station. So you did that. But did you actually go the next day in San Francisco at Rail Evolution, California? Yes or no? Were you there?
I wasn't there, no.
Right. That's the real problem. Because right at the end, in the afternoon, the last presentation was a presentation by the French people who right now are building a 200-mile high-speed line, which, by the way, is nearly entirely paid for by the private sector. And if you're, and I've actually talked to your chairman about this, and he now fully understands what this is about and why we have these problems here. And if you look at what they're doing over there, so initially they had little bits of high-speed line, then they had an entire section which was blended. And then everybody's running
25 miles an hour, high-speed trains, freight, local commuter trains, all on the same tracks doing the same speed, until the whole thing got congested. But they had ridership. So then the private sector came in, and they're building a high-speed line. And are they going to any cities? No. They're not going anywhere near any cities. They try to stay close to freeways because there are no freeways with ground noise and stuff like that. But then what happens is that when this high-speed line goes anywhere near a city that has a station that wants the train to stop, the local authorities are paying for branch lines, which peel off the high-speed line at high speed, slow down to 125, connect you the exact same old system that they had before, and then when they're done, they pay for another branch that gets back into a high-speed line. Your chairman fully understands this. I get the impression that your chairman is probably, if he hasn't already got it, has had a serious discussion with your chief executive. Because your chairman actually told me, I said, Jesus Christ, we've got the same freaking problem in more than half of the stations in the entire alignment between San Jose, between LA and San Francisco. So the sooner, I don't really want to go to all this tonight, but my advice to you is to go and look at that presentation. I can send you the video if you need it, because we taped it, and listen to what these people have got to say. Because once you understand how these lines are designed, you're going to find out that all these problems you're having with the communities totally disappear. They just go. That's all I want to say for tonight. The bottom line is they don't go around building high-speed lines right down the middle of communities. That just doesn't happen.
Okay.
Not in Europe, anyway. Exactly.
Particularly since we're supposed to be more high-tech, and we're supposed to do better solutions here in America, this should not be happening.
We're not a third world country.
Right. And that's what you guys are treating us as.
But anyway, everybody calm down, I think. Okay, show of hands, who in this room is against this project? Not a single hand. You probably in one of the only places in California that really, really supports this project. So it really is in your interest,
to work with us.
Work with us. Let's figure this all out together and let's land on a solution that actually, if you do it right, we're going to end up with something better than what we have now. No more honking of Caltrains, no more diesel shaking our houses down every time we leave the city goes by. Okay. We can fix all this. We can fix all this. And then we will make more people, as Sergio said, more people happy than people unhappy. Gary, I think you guys summed it up when you said you started in San Francisco in Northern California, and it was working, cooking along, and then all of a sudden, time out, you went to Southern California, it cooled off, now it's back. Things are a little different, but it still has to be picked up and moved forward. It's a process, and that's evolving. And you do a great job coming out and keeping us informed and being a part of it.
So, Beza, but just one thing before we finish. I mean, we can go, we'll update this again from tonight, but this really was just, not just this group, but me on, just generally in this corridor, what we've really sort of heard is the concerns of the various communities coming through here. And I think, we've hit on many of these tonight. Really, this is just up there, maybe just, I think we've pretty much, apart from maybe not talking about trails, I think we've pretty much covered every single one of these tonight. So, again, this really here was just, this is what we've heard so far in sort of the broad categories. I think, from what I've heard tonight, I mean, this is actually still a pretty good list, but is there anything, that you feel at a higher level, we've definitely got this one. Maybe we need to do this one at about 3 times the size of the font. But is there anything that you feel is missing? I mean, we're going to be coming back out in January, but at the point we're still sort of doing our final fixing of the footprints. So, do you feel this sort of does generally pick up on the concerns of the community? If there's any, do you think there's anything really glaringly missing or anything?
I don't know, landowners
Property values.
Well, I mean that's
Oh, yeah, there it is, right there.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're talking about primarily homes, but and again, this is a little bit outside the scope of Edenvale, but I know one of the potential alignments may affect the charter school down at Monterey and Bailey. And what would happen? I mean, would they move this? What would happen in a situation like that? Would they move the school? Would they rebuild the school?
I mean, the school districts are actually part of our technical working group. I mean, we meet with them. You know, it depends. Is it planning? You know, generally for the charter schools, they, you know, their facilities are generally provided by the actual regional school district, which we meet with. You know, moving schools is not easy. It's something we want to meet with them early because if they do have to get moved, it is a lengthy process. And we're going to need to work with the school districts to figure out how we can best, you know, make sure that they're kept whole and still serve their students in the community. But yeah, schools are definitely something. Oops. Amongst many other things that we do look at.
Just I guess a couple notes because it looks like we're starting to close here. You already mentioned there's going to be an open house, which is sort of a large public meeting, and that'll be maps out. And we are providing updates, but we're also going to be gathering lots of different ways. So we'll have maps, we'll be asking for drawn maps, and all kinds of ways of getting your input. With our comment forms, I encourage you all to fill them out and give them to us. Those go into the record and they are considered, they are read. So I would encourage you to fill those out and give them to us. You can either hand them now or scan an email. But it's important that we get those. I'm taking notes, and the authorities are going to get those, but I do encourage you to do that. If you're interested in getting added to the mailing list, so when the date of the open houses are determined, and it's most likely that one of the open houses will be somewhere in the Monterey Highway area, so it should be pretty close to here. You can just let Elizabeth know. We'll be working with her to get information out to Edenvale. But if you just sort of put a note near your name if you signed it, we'll just have you added to the authorities as well, sort of which but we're definitely interested in coming back, finding more opportunities to get information. And we know sometimes it's frustrating, but I think these meetings are really important, just so we can kind of get a technical check. And we do appreciate it.
Can I make one last comment, please? The community working groups, the way that you conduct them has to change. You have to turn them into real community working group. Because right now, it's information from the authority that is pumped down to these people and they're supposed to spread it out. And it's not two-way traffic. And you have, right now, nobody knows about these community working groups. Okay? You're making it a secret. Morgan Galley said it's a statewide policy. Okay? It's in I can show you where all the comments are. And you have to change that, but people in the community have to understand that a community working group is a working group and it's not conducted the way we conducted the meetings. But you have to understand that, that there are people around the table who are working that represent us, and then afterwards we are allowed to make comments. That you've got to stop making these community meetings one way and secret that nobody knows about. That's got to stop. That's my final comment.
Just to let you know, I did let everybody know we're on District 2, that join line, I did that. I also worked with Karen. You added me to the high-speed rail.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I have a lot of Edenvale people. In fact, if anybody, I have a Yahoo group that we're just basically using to let people know of these meetings. So if anybody wants to sign their email.
I think you have about 35 people.
Yeah, I have about 35 people now, but I don't know that a lot of them are from Edenvale other than a few of you people that might have from the NLC meeting.
I put it on next door. I did post
I'd
on
be
next
happy
door.
to invite you to one of my meetings with a much larger attendance.
We must put out quite a spread.
We actually show people how to feel high-speed lines. We actually show them how trenches are built.
Judy can't have what she wants. I'll explain that to Judy generally why she can't have the rights of comprehension. She will understand. You will.
So we do have some maps out in the back if people want to go look at them.
Yeah, well, you have a better one on the side.
I just want to say thank you very much for coming out. Both of y'all. I really appreciate it.
Always good to get the feedback.
It means a lot to me back then in those years.
So you guys interested in signing for that?